Okay, so I'm gonna slightly correct Nick. I'm actually not talking that much about what Power Ledger does. I've just hacked some things together that I'm gonna show you guys, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So firstly, I wanna say I was reading this banner over here, if everyone can see it to the left, about this conference, and it says, dedicated to building secure, high-performing cloud-native applications. What I'm about to show you is not secure or high-performing. I literally built this in the last 10 hours, and it's been so much fun, and I've used so much online code and code from friends, but it's definitely not a best practice by any means. I have no test cases. I tested everything in production. It's completely dodgy. But what my intent here today, which I'll get to in a second, is basically making cloud seem a bit less intimidating. So coming from the world of enterprise and using cloud, you go to a lot of conferences or a lot of lunch and learns and talks about cloud, and you're always talking about the end goal. We're going to lift and shift all of our on-prem stuff to the cloud, and you have no idea like what happens in between. Like me, myself, I had a hard time visualizing what that actually means, and then like what that looks like. And the second side of why I want to talk about this today is I'm part of an organization called She Codes, and it's just a bunch of females who get together and build things and are figuring it all out together. And it's hilarious to me because we have these amazing mentors who have been in industry for years, and I say to them, like, yeah, I deployed my personal website on Google Cloud. And they'll be like, wow, I could never do that. Like, cloud's so crazy. I can't believe you can do that. And I'm sitting there, like I'm standing there as they're saying this to me, thinking about like how I literally made a folder and dropped an index.html file in it. And that's like so remarkable. And so why I wanted to do this today is to be able to just show you on the actual UI, like just show you it running. So it's gonna be a live demo, so things will probably break, of me doing it, so you can just see that these things are fun to play with on your own time. It's not just about enterprise. This is things you can utilize in your passion projects. So I'm gonna, formalities, get a little bit about me out of the way. I'm not qualified. Disclaimer, I didn't build half this code. I just stole it from places. But I have the right licensing. And yeah, I'm a business graduate. I have no dev training. I'm about the most basic dev you can encounter. And so you'll probably find bugs on my code. I may expose something at some point when you're going to try really hard not to. So now that I've set your expectations very high, let's get into it. So what did I build? I had this concept 2 months ago when I applied to speak where I wanted to build this thing, and I didn't realize how I was going to do it, which is a great way to approach things. But I'm using Cloud Scheduler, which I'll talk about all these tools in a little bit more detail. But it's essentially my cron. So I'm just triggering on Google Cloud. I'm triggering a pub/sub queue. So when I started this project, I thought it was like Kafka. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, it's a messaging queue. I'm going to use it as my database. It's not a messaging queue. You can't use it as your database. It's basically just Google Cloud's way of talking between their applications, or at least that's how I'm going to define it. Feel free to correct me, Google Cloud guys. And then I'm basically I'm creating a message and then using that message to trigger a function, which on Google Cloud is called a cloud function. On AWS, this is Lambda. And so it's a serverless function that I've written in Python. And what that function does is it calls an API. And this API is an Australian company. They're called EnergyOS. And I asked them if I could use their API for this demo. And basically, they have live household data. So what I'll be demoing today will be people's household energy consumption and production live, so as we're demoing, which is quite cool. And so they allowed me to use it as long as I didn't give up my IP key, or my API key, which we'll see if that happens. But so I'm going to be querying that API through my Python code in my cloud function, and then at the bottom of my cloud function, I create a Firebase message, or sorry, Firestore message using Firebase. So basically, what that is, Firestore is like, man, this is my very vague understanding of it. Firebase itself is NoSQL database structure. It's JSON objects. In Firestore, it's just Google Cloud's like native application of it, which obviously can scale more, which I'm not using it for whatsoever, but it has a bit different of a structure. There's key value pairs and then a concept of documents, which I'll show you guys a little bit more. But basically, I'm using that to store my energy readings as they come in. And then from there, I'm hosting a static UI on Google Cloud Storage, which, like I said, you literally just drop files into a folder, which is called a bucket. It's not rocket science. And then my UI has a little piece of JavaScript code where it listens to Firestore. So when Firestore gets a message, my UI will update. And so I've basically built this application where we can see real time on the UI houses getting energy data through this API. And that's what I've done, and that's what I'm going to show you. So I have some descriptions here of what each thing does. I think I've kind of talked through this. I'm just going to have this as a reference if someone asks me, so I can be like, oh, where's that thing I literally just Googled an hour ago and pasted here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the data, just so everyone's on the same page. Basically, from the API, I get it in this format, which is the ID of the meter, the attributes, which is like the type of data I'm pulling. So in this case, I'm pulling cumulative kilowatt hours. It's not important. It's a minor detail. And then the timestamp as well. And so what my UI requires, and this UI I've just stolen from someone who had they basically modified a code pen and for an internal project, which is just like this cute UI. I didn't build any of it. I literally just took it from this guy with his consent and then added in the ability to listen to the Firebase messages and then update the UI based on that. And so the UI is expecting this, so I'm doing a little bit of parsing in my Cloud function to go from one format to the other, but it's not too difficult. And so the one thing I do want to show on slides, everything else I'll show live, is just the Cloud scheduler. And the reason for that is I do have some of the payload that I'm sending to the API that's sensitive in it, so I'm not going to demo it. Sensitive being it will expose the node number or the ID of the meters. So basically, Cloud scheduler, it's really easy. Another thing I should mention is everything I've done today I did through the UI. I didn't use any CLI commands. I didn't use the Google Cloud SDK. I literally did this entire project through the UI, which I think is really cool in terms of being able to show you everything, but also because for someone who's not a dev and just really likes playing with these things, it's much less intimidating when you can just see everything yourself and have an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. So what we're looking at here is my Cloud scheduler job. So basically, you just create a job. You tell it what you want it to do. So in this case, I'm telling it to publish a message on the topic called readings. And then I can turn it on and off, which I'll show you guys. And then from there, when I'm creating it, ask me a few very basic things, including the frequency. So how often do I want it to run, which is in the Unix cron timestamp format. And so in my case, I just have 5 stars, which means every minute, every day, every week, and so on. And then that right there, that target, when I select pub sub, and then the reading, it literally will create the message based on this. And then I've just put some fake information in my payload just for demonstration purposes. So let's hop into it and see what we can break. Okay. So if I hop over to Google Cloud here, so this is my project. I have my cron job running, and well, it's not running yet. I can turn it on. So I'm going to make it run. And how, which is definitely not best practice, but how I've done everything here is I find all my errors through my logs. So Google Cloud uses Stackdriver for their logging, and that's literally how I find all my errors. I was writing my Python code in here and finding syntax errors through this, which is definitely not best practice, but it's actually a pretty simple experience, which is surprising. So basically, I can see in all my logs everything that's happening, which I won't dive into in too much detail just at this point. But what I want to show from this is that it's actually quite intuitive to be able to tell what's going on. So as I trigger the scheduler, it basically shows me here that the scheduler's happened, it's finished, it worked, and then I can see that the function's been executed, or it started, so that's the Cloud function. And so I'll hop over and show that to you guys. So Cloud functions, for anyone who doesn't know, they basically run, they support 8 different programming languages on Google Cloud. I'm doing mine in Python 3.7. The one limitation of Cloud functions is you can't run anything too massive, so that's why they've introduced Google Cloud Run, which you can actually Dockerize things and do the same serverless type applications. But in my case, I don't need anything other than my Python script, which is just a main.py file. And so I have my Python code running here, which is querying the API. I probably won't go through the actual code itself too much. Yeah, please. Oh no, thank you for telling me. It's a bit staticky, hey. Is that better? We're all happy. You know what's unfortunate about this screen is you can't see the pink line, which is the crashes. So you guys can't even see all the times where I've just destroyed all of it. So yeah, it always works, see? It's always working. So I hop over here to the source, and this is my Python code. What's cool for my demo purposes was I can do environmental variables in the UI as well. So I don't have to expose to you guys my API credentials, which is great. And so basically all I'm doing here is I'm querying the, making HTTP request to get the data. And so then once I've gotten the response, I do this function called pull readings. And so when you create a cloud function, you actually give them a trigger function. So where is the pub sub message going to get passed into? And so here it's passing into this function an object, which is the pub sub message. And then it can see from there, get the data. And so we go through. I'm formatting it in some places here. All pub sub messages are encrypted base 64, so I'm decrypting it. And then I make the API call. And then here's where I'm doing my parsing to put it in the format that I want it in. So I'm taking it from the original format of the node ID and the timestamp to the name, the import, the export. This fun little dodgy bit of code here is interesting. Basically, I'm getting it in a format of cumulative energy data. So it's like, I don't even know, like 9 decimal places, or it's 9 digits long, this number. And my really accurate way of measuring it is I'm just cutting off everything but the last 2 digits because it looks cooler on my UI. So this data is really accurate, and we should definitely bill on it. And so then from there, I'm printing some things so I can see it on my logs. And then this piece of code is essentially all I'm doing to be able to store that data in Firebase. I actually had, or in Firestore, I had help from my friend Ben, who I want to call out, who was helped me figure this piece out. Yesterday, at about this time, I had no idea how I was going to update my UI. In my mind, I just assumed I could just listen to PubSub itself, and my UI could listen from there, which is not possible, and I learned that the hard way. But it all worked out, and I was able to get through it. So these lines here are the ones that are just passing my now parsed data onto Firestore. And so we'll have a look at that. So essentially, once again, all through the UI, you're setting your root, which is just like the collection of data, and then what the documents are, which in my case, it's literally just the different like objects, I guess, the 3 meters that I'm pulling data from the API. And so I've labeled them consumer 1, prosumer 1, and prosumer 2. What the word prosumer means is just I'm someone that prosumes and consumes. It's nothing to be too caught up on. So the consumer will always have no export because they're not exporting energy from their house. And then their import here is their consumption. And then the prosumer will usually have both. And so all I'm looking at here in that what is that, right-hand side, is the actual reading. Like I've said, I cut it to be prettier. And so this is just the last one that's come through. And so from there, I did something, I won't say dodgy, I think it's okay, where I just used my old domain to host the cloud bucket. And the reason for that is that I didn't want to have to deal with like pointing name servers and stuff. And I couldn't figure out, I'm sure there's a way, but how to get like a base URL that Google Cloud gives you for the bucket. So from there, I guess I can go into my UI a different way, but in my UI, I literally just dumped all of the folders, which are all static, into this folder called latency demo. And so all I have running for my UI is my index.html. I have one CSS file, a couple source images, and then a bunch of JavaScript, which almost all of which I didn't write. The one kind of piece here that I want to point out is that this Firebase config, which I'm not going to open because it has API keys, and I'm learning things, is that basically that's what authenticates the Firebase API when you call it from your JavaScript front end. And I'll just hop into code quickly so we can look at this maybe a little. Oh, nope, that's not going to work. Okay. We'll inspect it once we look at it. I know how to do these things. So basically in my index.js file, I have just a chunk that's basically listening to Firebase or calling the API to see if anything updates. And so I was testing it during the previous demo. It takes 6 seconds from when I trigger my cloud scheduler for my front end to update. And so the highly anticipated front end, ta-da! Yeah, amazing, right? Rocket science. I did none of this. So basically, this was originally a code pen, which is really cool. It was like showing flights. It was like airplanes. And so all that one of the devs did like a year ago in our office was just change the icon of the airplane to an electron. And then we just added in some different icons. And I think it's really cool. But basically what it's showing is that, so you can see it's tallying up in the right-hand side what each meter is importing and exporting. And like I said, this is all live data. So if I want to show like that it's truly working and I'm not just like triggering this stuff, well, I guess I can't entirely prove it, but I'll pop back into my cloud scheduler just so I can trigger it and then we can right away see. And then I'll just give this one a hard reset so that it pulls the last message because it's just querying the API, but I still want to us to see it update. So if I go here, I'm just going to press this button here. I have it running every minute, which means that it won't run for the next 15 seconds, but who has that time? So I'm just going to press this button, run now, and then we'll just wait and stare at each other awkwardly until it updates. That was a joke. We don't have to do that. So it will hopefully update. This is the risky part of my demo, but I'm also planning on leaving it run while I do Q&A so that we can really see if it breaks. Like I'm really widening the amount. But that's essentially everything. That's what it is in a nutshell. I'm hoping people ask me really hard questions about how the code works so I can really test myself. But but it was something that literally probably took me 8 hours to build. Of that, well, since I used pieces of code from everywhere, in the process, some things I learned is that, obviously, like I learned a lot about what PubSub actually is because I had a very different understanding of what it is and what I could use it for. I also, man, this is not happening, hey. Hold on, let's just press it again and make double the queue. And then when it works, it'll be 2 of them. And then, yeah, there we go. And that was definitely 2 of them as well, that's hilarious. And so I'll just inspect this so you can see what's happening. Also, this is supposed to be coming from the sun, but like, who has time to update the UI, right? I'm doing cool serverless things. And so basically it's calling this function, which is called log reading in my JavaScript. And so this is the object that it's passing through when it calls it. And I will quickly show you guys that code because I think it's interesting. Oh yeah, that's not gonna happen, hey. Do I have to figure out how to change like my Chrome theme? Here, this can't be this hard. Let's just, on the fly, change my themes here. Man, every developer says dark theme's the best. It's really not. All right, let's look at it this way. So this is my index.html, which did change a little bit. So basically, I add, oh no, never mind, this didn't change. Oh yeah, here we go. I add these 3 scripts in, which are the Firebase JS scripts. And so I'm importing those in my HTML file. And then where I'm actually using Firebase in my index.js, so JavaScript file, is here. So you initialize it, so you have to have the config within the same repository. And then from there, I'm literally just choosing what collection, which is called power in this case, that I'm pulling from, and then this is where I'm executing that function, which is previously written, to actually animate the energy as it flows through. And so that's literally all I'm doing to listen to events, as well as the script imports in the HTML file, which is cool. And so, ta-da! And that's essentially all it is. I have some other cool functions, which I can just show, which is that basically what I've done at this point is just look at what they're using. So the houses are updating based on what energy they're using at the time, right? And so in this case, it's coming from the sun when they're actually exporting energy. So it's basically saying like, oh, I'm exporting energy, it's coming from the sun because I have solar on my house. And then when I'm importing, it's coming from this little box over here, which represents like the energy utility, which in Western Australia's case is usually coal energy, but it can be solar as well. And then I can also do this function on my JavaScript where it's called log trading, and I'm just going to copy it over, which is essentially making a trade between one house to the other, using what they already have of reading. So if they haven't exported any energy, if they don't have any production, then they won't be able to do it. So I have like 20 seconds here, so this is really living life on the edge. Ta-da! And if anyone didn't see that, ta-da! It's essentially trading with the tree because my formatting's off, but that's all I have for you today. I hope everyone has hard questions and grills me about this, but all I'm trying to show is that this stuff is pretty cool and intuitive to use, and you can start hacking around with it today.
All right, can we have a round of applause for Megan?